I will call the planning meeting of the Lee County, or retreat, excuse me, of the Lee County Board of Education to order. Ms. Lang is going to offer our invocation.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day and for those gathered here. We pray for safety and blessings for our schools. May the leaders of our schools be blessed with wisdom and energized to inspire their staff and students during this most difficult time. May the needs of our students be seen, and we pray your provision and will to meet those needs. Grant all wisdom, discernment, and patience as we consider the matters before us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Ms. Lang. You have the agenda before you. We can adopt it by consent. All right. We have a consent agenda. Dr. Miller, is there anything you'd like to discuss on that?
We have a brief agenda today. There are 9 recommendations for employment, 5 resignations, 1 retirement, 1 reassignment, and 1 correction to a previous agenda, and 5 fundraisers.
What is the pleasure of the board as it relates to this agenda? We have a motion from Ms. Ford. Is there a second?
I'll second.
A second from Ms. Van. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Passes 5-0. We'll move on to the discussion and action items that are on our list tonight. Our first guest is Mr. Dennis Lee with the Lee County Tax Assessor's Office. Dr. Miller?
Dennis Lee is Chief Tax Assessor for Lee County. He's here today to speak to the board about property reevaluation. Mr. Lee?
Thanks for having me. I was wanting to talk about we've got a reevaluation pending. It should be, we signed a contract back in January. The field work will start first of next month. Now, just a little background. We haven't had a reevaluation in the county where you get out and you go around all pieces of property, look at the house, see what kind of condition the house is in since 1997. And I believe that may have been the first time that we converted to the current appraisal system that we have now for computers. We call it WinGAM. In 2006, the county contracted with this company to do a drive-by review of the property. That's where they drive down the road and look at the property and come up with updating the pricing tables and the land schedules. And so we're doing a complete walk around of all improvements this time, front and rear photographs. We're going to reprice all the structures and all the land in the county. Reason being is our values are below standard. Every year, the audit department comes in and does a ratio study on what our property values are that we're carrying on the books. That is, we've got to be within 90% of the sale price to stay in compliance with the state guidelines. Our ratio study indicates that we're dropping down to a critical level to where the county can get some issue of fines up to $5 a parcel. Now the ratio study is, when I quote these numbers to you, they're a little different than you're thinking about. Like our property throughout the state, if you have a $100,000 house, you're assessed at 40%. And then that assessed value is multiplied times the millage rate to give you the tax bill. If you have exemptions such as homestead, that will come off of the 40% value. So if you had a $100,000 house with a standard homestead, you get $40,000 minus $2,000, gives you $38,000 times the millage rate, and it gives you your tax bill. So these ratios are taking the 40% values that we have on property divided by the 100% value that it's sold for. In 2015, we had a 38.02 ratio. Now, the state guideline says that our ratios can fall between 36 and 44%. So we were good on that. Now, last year in 2019, we had a 37.32 ratio. And the internal ratio that I ran on our system today was 37. So we need to do a reevaluation for several reasons. Number one, we got to get the values closer to market. And we got to have them equalized. Say, if you have a house, you have a similar house next door, you should have the same value on it. And right now, I don't have that. The land values can be different. The house can be, we put a quality grade on homes. A 100 is an average base house. A 120 is a little bit better. I've got houses that may be graded to 120, and if it's sold, it may be graded to 140 to 150. There's no equity that I can do on this. But I was surprised in going through sales and listings, really, of properties. I've got some addresses just to quote you on. These are pretty far-fetched. I mean, there's a house in Thistledale Drive, 2,559 feet, built 2020. Our schedule that we have in our system is based off the 2006 values that was placed in there. And it's producing $230,000 for that house right now. The house is listed for $333,000. So right now, if I picked up a new house in our system with the pricing that I have, I'm running $90, $95 a foot, whereas they're selling for $125 to $135 a foot. Now that's your more upper end. The lower end houses are not quite that dramatic on their spread, but it's still an increase. And like I said, the state comes in every year, they look at our values to make sure that we're up to what they're selling for, and then they look at how well we're doing as far as equalization between your lower end houses and your upper end houses, make sure that you're not showing any bias. And let's see. So right now, I just want to, we need to do a reevaluation, get all the values, properties looked at. We'll get front and rear photos of every piece of property. And we'll set in new schedules, apply them to every property, and then we'll analyze with the marketplace and see how close we are to the market. And we'll come up with a good, equitable market value on your property. Now, I've heard comments where people said that we are falsely raising values in the county. I'm sorry, but people buying and selling houses make the market, we only reflect what they're paying for it. And that's most difficult because people say, well, it don't sell that much. And I'm sitting here looking at 70 sales. It says, yeah, it does. And this affects the school board, as I think you've probably been aware of on your local fair share the loss that you experience. And I know you've been advised of that, so I don't need to go into that. But the better we can get our digest the better off we're all at. At least I'll be able to look at people and say, we're treating you the same as any other property that's similar to yours. I know that we have houses built on one level and houses built on a much higher level, but I want to make sure they're all equal with their comparables to make sure that we have the equity that I'm looking for. A reevaluation it's not a bad term. A reevaluation is good. It should be done very often because the better you get, the more reevaluations you do, the better your equity is between your house and your neighbor's house. Your property values come in there. If we come up on a value and we get a 20% increase, then the millage rates are mandated to roll back 20%. And really, you want to come out with about the same type of tax bill that you had last year. Now, my problem in my office is we send an assessment notice out to every property owner every year. At the bottom of that assessment notice, I'm mandated to put an estimated tax bill. And it's based on the previous year's assessment. So if I went up 20% on your house, that estimate is going to reflect a 20% increase in the tax bill. But the millage rates are set, October or September, and that assessment notice is going to come out in May. And so we're going to put a flyer in with every assessment notice that says, kind of disregard the estimated tax bill. It's not correct because it's based on last year's millage rate. But the last county I worked in, about 5% of the people read it. The other 95% came in and said, you're crazy. So, I don't know if you have any questions for me. It's kind of a quick synopsis of what we're looking at, but 1997 to now is a long time. Property values have went up. Everything else we've bought went up. There's no doubt. When I'm sitting here looking at listings, and the listings, people can say, you can list it for anything you want. That's not really true. For about the last 20 years, when I talk to the realtors, they say they get about 95% of the listing price. And my sales that I have indicate that they're selling for around $130, $35 a foot for a brand new 1,900-foot house with a small quarter-acre lot. It's just astounding because when I first got into the business, I think it was running $38 a foot. So it came up.
Dennis, I have two questions. Number one, I'm assuming there will be an appeals process once you get the reevaluation in so the individual property owner can appeal if necessary.
Yes. When the assessment notices are mailed out, you have a 45-day window from that date to come in and file an appeal with your property. You have several courses of action you can go. One is just appeal it to the assessor's office, and then you have the right to go to the Board of Equalization, which is a 3-person panel off the grand jury list. If you have a piece of property that's valued more than $500,000, you can go to a hearing officer and file an appeal there. However, that's going to cost you an appraisal. And then there's arbitration, which costs, you're going to have an appraisal and you're going to share the cost of the arbitrator. But the most inexpensive route is to go in, talk to us. We verify that we got all the information correct, bathrooms, square footage, age of the home, and the condition of your home. And then at that, go to the Board of Equalization and present your case, and we will present ours with the sales that we have to back up the value that we placed on your property.
Okay, the second question is, are you aware, have you been apprised of what the county intends to do so that we don't find ourselves 23 years behind reevaluation 23 years from now.
Well, what I proposed is that we can appraise a class of property, be it agricultural, residential, commercial. My proposal is once you get a complete reevaluation done, my office should be able to go and look at the sales on the agricultural sales 1 year, the residentials, and then commercial, and start back over again and keep this 3-year cycle going. We can't come in and spot reappraise, if that's what you want to call it, you know, a particular house. The legislators came in 2000, I believe it was 10, and with the number of foreclosures we had in the metro area, they said that the assessor's office was awfully quick to go up on the values, but they wouldn't come down as quickly when the values started dropping. And so now, if you have a house that you bought out of foreclosure, the following year, we must put that value on the property for 1 year. And then we can put back the market value if it's different. But that causes a lot of confusion on people. But especially if you can't come to my office and say, I want to compare taxes on my neighbor, because I don't know what your neighbor pays. I don't know what kind of exemptions they may have. But when you come in and look at the value, I want to make sure the value of the property is fair and equal, and I can explain where they have to put that override in if you buy it from the bank or a foreclosure of some nature.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
I have one. Can you tell me, I mean, you said a lot of stuff, but can you spell it out more simple for me? Say the average person buys a house and he doesn't, you know, he's got a pool house, he's got something, whatever he's got out there, and maybe your office doesn't know about it. How is this going to directly affect that person when you go out there, go walk around and add those structures to it? I mean, it's going to increase their taxes.
Yes, it will.
By how much? I mean,
That's why we send the assessment notice out to you, so you can prepare for the bill that may come out later that year. If you have an addition that we do not have on record, I can't go back on you and place it on for, if you built it 6 years ago, I cannot go back and put that back on for 6 years. But when we do pick up these additions or any modifications, yeah, your property value is going to go up.
So say you find out 80% of the county has structures on their houses that you don't know about, or a huge part. You're just saying you're going to have to roll back the mills rate to accommodate that, right? Or is it everybody in the county's property is going up?
Running by me now.
I mean, just say I remember one meeting you spoke up, you said there were plenty of properties that had structures on it that y'all didn't think your office was aware of. Because we're 20 years, is that right, 23 years from the last evaluation? So what is that going to, if the majority of the property, I mean, is this everybody's taxes are going up, or are you going to roll back?
Again, if we go in and do this reevaluation and our cost tables, let's say on 20% level, I don't know what it is because we haven't run final numbers on that, then you'll have to roll back the millage rate 20% for that overall increase, not an individual property, but as far as the overall for the county.
Correct.
Those people that made additions to their homes, they are going to get an increase because they increase the value of their property. Now,
I'm speaking more to people that are buying houses that had structures on it when they bought the house. They didn't actually do the structure. You know, they didn't build that structure.
well, right now, to keep this fair, we have to use the 2006 pricing schedule to keep everybody on the same playing field.
Gotcha.
And we know we're coming in low on them, and they've got a fee appraisal at the bank, and they've got a escrow set up. They know what the property is worth because they paid it. And unless the bank's giving you 100% financing, they're going to do an 80-20% loan to value. And you're going to realize the assessor's office alone. I mean, I can't count the number of phone calls over the last month and a half that says, my value is too low. I'm trying to sell my house and people are looking at it thinking that's the value of my home, and it's not. And I try to tell them, they don't use our values at the bank. They get a fee appraisal done. And they use market sales. But, no, I'm not worried about somebody that bought their house recently on a
You
fair
have a
market
base
sale.
to compare it to, I see what you're saying.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How long do you think this will take?
The company will have people in the field that have IDs, they're gonna have signage on the side of their vehicles, and we will be sending out assessment notices next May
Okay.
for the 2021 digest.
Are you going to ask questions, or are you just looking around and taking photographs?
They're gonna go up and knock on the door. If somebody's home, we'll verify how many bathrooms they got. When you look at our property record card, the way the schedule is built, you can say, well, I got 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms. That's just a descriptive.
Sure.
The things that's gonna add value will be plumbing, heating, fireplace, type of construction, whether it's brick frame, and the age and condition of the home. Those are the main things we're gonna be looking at. And like I said, we got some photographs in our system that's outdated. We got the wrong photograph on wrong properties. When I first got here 3 years ago, we had many properties not drawn off on a map to know where they're located. We've got that down to just a handful right now. We had like 800 pieces of property that did not have an address on the property record card. I'm going, where's this? But, you know, when I got here, we had, from the GIS guy said we had about 1,500 properties not mapped, and I was like, wow, our website isn't really worth a flip yet, but we've come a long ways on this.
I have a question. If you're going to complete this in May, then it will take effect December, a year from now? Is that when the property owners will see? Oh, you can't hear?
Are you using mine?
I don't know.
If you finish in May, we'll give you taxes, they'll start paying in December, right?
Yes. The assessment notices always come out, try to get them out in May. Then we'll turn the tax digest over to the tax commissioner, and the millage rates will be set between the county, city, school board. And then the bills will go out whenever she mails them, which is, October, September. I don't know when she mails bills, but they're mostly due before January 1.
December 20th.
December 20th, okay?
And so it will be in effect next year, is what you're saying. I mean, not this year, but next year, they will see this reevaluation in their statements.
I'm sorry.
Next year's when we'll see it.
Yes. Like I said, the reevaluation will come into effect, and it will be shown, the value will be showing on the assessment notice that we mail in May.
Okay, thank you.
So this reevaluation has no impact on the digest that's about to be set, that we're gonna base our budget upon in a few days.
The reevaluation does not affect the current digest
No,
that we're setting our millage rate on this
No.
year.
2020 is the digest with what increases that I picked up so far for till January 1st of this year. And I did pick up some large increases on certain properties. But I don't know if it's going to be enough to help tremendously or not. But again, the main thing that I'm looking for is make sure that you're treated the same as your neighbor. You know, the equity factor is what I look at. After I achieve that, then I'll go up and see how close we can get to what they're selling for to keep us in compliance with the state. And then every year I can rotate and do a particular class of property to keep this up to where we don't fall behind again. That's the, in the state of Georgia, they don't mandate how often you should do a revow. They only wait and look at the ratio study, and when you get too low to the bottom and they're going to get penalized, that's when they start talking about it. And that shouldn't be that way. You should rotate it and keep it up to date. And with the number of staff that I have in the office, which is 2 appraisers and 2 clerks, I think we can do it, believe it or not.
Are there any other questions of Mr. Lee? Hearing none, thank you very much. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. If y'all have any questions, contact me at the office. I'll be glad to answer them for you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, sir. Stay safe. All right, moving on to the next item on our discussion and action items. Kevin Dowling. Dowling is here to talk about our operations plan. Dr. Miller, do you have anything to provide in the way of introduction there?
Well, I'll just say that when schools closed in March for the coronavirus pandemic, our focus was on bringing the school year to a successful conclusion, but we also began working on reopening school this year. And Mr. Dowling, our assistant superintendent, has led the operations committee, which deals more with the day-to-day issues that we're going to face opening the school year in light of our coronavirus pandemic. So he's going to give the board an update on plans and preparations. Now, I will note that 4 out of 5 of our students plan to attend school in person this fall. When we gave the parents the choice between virtual and in-person learning, so that's certainly informed our preparations. You have a document which he's prepared, and then he can answer any questions the board may have.
Yes, sir.
So basically what you have in front of you is our operations plan. It's 2-sided papers. And then behind it, there's a couple of links on the operations plan, and I just wanted you to see where those links are leading to. Websites, one is our health procedures, and one is something for social emotional, basically supporting families at home with PBIS. So those are both in the operations plan in different places. We have a committee, and our committee is made of school admins, district admins, teachers, have a parent rep, our nurse coordinator, obviously. They're all part of the committee. We started meeting June the 4th, and we met pretty much after June the 4th. We met every Wednesday afterwards, pretty much until last week, when we kind of finally put the plan together. Please realize that, number one, this is a living document. In other words, this will change probably as new guidance and new information from Department of Public Health and CDC comes to light. We have also shared this with partners at Phoebe Putney, and they're going to look at this as well. One of them is actually one of our distinguished alumni. He's actually a distinguished alumnus, and he's part of their committee that helps school systems. So they'll be looking at it as well and give us some any ideas and such that they may look at the plan and say, okay, well, what about this, what about that? It's just considered more of a framework, as the more specific parts inside of the school are on the school plans. In other words, we may say social distancing in the hallways where applicable, blah, 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 but a school plan may actually say, on the 400 hall, we'll be doing this. Because all of our schools are all different, we kind of put a framework out so that the school could do the specific parts in there. So this mostly covers what we will do if we're in person, and it also has a little bit on there about remote, but really, if we do remote learning, there's not a whole lot of operations to worry about because we're not in the school building. So it's mostly those parts. This does come from guidance from CDC, Department of Public Health, GSBA, GSSA. A lot of folks have put things out there, and we try to look at all those and try to put together something with some of the guidance from them. We just had a few things come out this last week. Have them in my folder. Some new things from CDC and Department of Public Health, and we've been looking at those. It really doesn't say a whole lot different than what we have right now, but we are looking those over and reading those and trying to see is there something new that we need to change. For example, one of the things that just new guidance from CDC basically said that if you're sick with COVID, it's a 10-day isolation period, and it used to say you had to be fever-free for 3 days, 72 hours. Now it's 24 hours after the 10-day period. So, in other words, you couldn't go 6 days and then be fever-free and come back to work on day 7. You have to spend the 10 days. But then at the end of 10 days, if you have been fever-free for 24 hours, then you'd be eligible to go back to work. So, but that's one of the changes that they just put in just in the last few weeks, rather than the 72 hours. So, plan gives guidance on steps to take to help mitigate person-to-person spread through the use of face covering, social distancing, hand hygiene, isolating and taking care of the sick, and cohorting where possible. Talk about cohorting. Cohorting is basically trying to put kids in a pod, so to speak. And we do that a lot in our primary and elementary schools. Kids tend to stay with the same teacher, the same few teachers. It's very difficult to do once you get past 6th grade, basically, especially at the high school level. I mean, you don't really cohort. Kids have different electives, different classes, and they go to those. So difficult to do there, but easier to do in the lower grades, and we're obviously working on that as well. So, questions, concerns, ideas?
Anyone?
I have a question. It says, symptomatic persons with confirmed suspected siblings and household members also stay home. So, are you saying that if one kid in one school has a symptom, the other kid, his brother or sister now has to stay home also?
Well, if the kid gets confirmed COVID, if he has a symptom and he gets tested and he has COVID, then basically that's a quarantine for anyone who's in close contact with him, and usually.
That's the suspected.
Do what?
It says or suspected.
Yeah.
I can suspect my daughter has it, but my son doesn't.
Yeah. We're gonna try to get a positive case before we really start the quarantine part. Okay. I mean, we're not gonna. If somebody has the sniffles, we're not gonna quarantine a whole school because somebody has the sniffles. Okay.
What? And that was one of my second questions, because you said close contact.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would like to know what the definition of close contact is, because I believe all of this policy, in my opinion, hinges on what you guys define as close contact.
Well, CDC defines it as 6 feet or closer.
Less than 6 feet for 15 minutes.
15 minutes, right. But that's also what we found out last week, that's actually cumulative. So what I mean by that is we could spend 10 minutes talking and then walk away, and then come back 30 minutes later, spend 10 more minutes talking, and we've spent 15 minutes. So what we found out last week was that 15 minutes is actually cumulative time.
Well, I'm confused, because that's not what I read, that it was, you did not have to count minutes in a day.
Yeah, there's some differences there, but what we've been told by public health last week.
I thought 15 minutes were per episode of contact.
Yeah, that's what we thought.
Well, I will say there that that threw us for a loop when we dealt with an issue recently, and our understanding was it was not cumulative, and we even had documentation saying that from healthcare professionals. However, if there are other circumstances, for example, bodily fluids, touching, those type of things, they step over that time frame, because then it's another issue. It's not just within 6 feet, they actually have physical contact. So that presents a different challenge. I would say that probably what our nurse was talking with us today, and she said it's going to be a case-by-case basis. We're going to look at each case and then make a determination based on the CDC guidelines, and certainly consult the Department of Public Health.
And I appreciate everything and all these policies, my concern is there's no doubt when school starts, you're gonna have a bunch of people test positive. Not a doubt in my mind. I mean, I bet my paycheck on it. Are we going to send home everybody in that classroom, or everybody that was in that practice field, or everybody that was in that gymnasium because one person tested positive? Because if that's the stance we're gonna take, I don't see how we're gonna have school, and by September, everybody be home.
Well, I think that to a degree, our hands are kind of tied here, because we're gonna do what public health is gonna tell us to do.
I got that,
And,
but public health is saying 6 feet within
Yeah.
15 minutes, and that's what my concern is. Who's gonna be the person that's looking at it? The bodily fluids may exchange, but bodily fluids usually aren't gonna exchange much more than 6 feet. I just
Right.
don't wanna lose sight of that their guideline is direct contact, 6 feet, 15 minutes. I mean, if all of us are in this room right here and somebody tests positive, it's probably somebody could in next week. I mean, I don't think everybody in this room has to go home for 14 days because Jennifer over there tests positive. Whether she was sweating and doing jumping jacks or not.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'm just saying that, you know, we're not gonna be the ones that sometimes make those decisions. If a kid gets tested positive, we're gonna get told from public health or from, you know, whomever comes to us and says, okay, you've got to quarantine X amount. Now, we're gonna try to, you know, use some common sense and say, well, okay, but he was across the room from this kid the entire time, and we will say that, and I think one thing that we can try to do is if we have good seating charts, we have good documentation that shows that this kid was never near this kid, that I think is gonna help us, but I think as Dr. Miller said as well, it's gonna be a case-by-case basis. In some cases, that may prove that doesn't have to happen, in some cases, it may happen.
The CDC guidance now, that came out last Thursday, it basically, it would be that children in the immediate vicinity of that child within the classroom, not necessarily the whole classroom. Also, something I learned today, I did not know that passing in the hallways is not going to be a factor in determining, because then you potentially have a whole school.
Exactly.
Because of, you know, in a high school or middle school setting. So it's gonna, we're asking our teachers to have seating charts, and so that we'll know where each child is sitting in class and who's adjacent to them, who may have had contact within the 6 feet from more than 15, be able to track that. And then we'll look at the symptoms to guide how we respond. You know, that there are students that they have a runny nose because we have sinus issues here in South Georgia and allergies. It's just part of where we live. And so, you know, that's different from a student who never gets sick and now they have a runny nose and a sore throat. We're gonna case by case look at the situation and then make a decision based on that, certainly consulting with healthcare professionals.
And then the last comment I want to make is when you said you're going to rely to the Department of Public Health. If you pull up the Department of Public Health's office guidelines right now in Southwest Georgia, and you probably pull them up in North Georgia, and then you look at CDC, nobody agrees on what the right procedure is right now. So I do think we need to, even if you were to talk to, I think, let's just say Jan in Albany office today, and then talk to Stephanie tomorrow, I bet you'd get a different answer on what the right thing to do.
Right.
So I just, that's why I really like you taking the case by case, but I also would like to have some sort of broad blanket or definition of what we're gonna do or not do. I mean, saying case by case is I don't know if that's the right answer, I guess, is where I'm going with that. I mean, that's my opinion. And, cause I think you need some sort of policy. We're either gonna test, we're not gonna wanna test, we need to, you know, and let's just, we haven't even spoken of athletics. You know, those football players are gonna trade sweat.
Yep.
And if you send, how many are they practicing in groups of 50?
Yes.
If you send all 50 home, there's your football season.
Right.
Not that I'm worried about football season ever to help my kids. Please do not take that as that's that case, even if it's cheerleading or
I mean,
chess.
everything you say is a good point, and I mean, and that's part of the problem what happens when everybody comes back in the building and something goes wrong. And that's, we say case by case because every time that there's a case like this, we're gonna have discussions with public health and they're gonna tell us. Now, the good thing is Dr. Miller's, he's got good contact with Dr. Ruiz, and I think that will be pretty much a consistent answer for us from him. I would say that we would probably look to his guidance as much or more than anybody else on these situations case by case. I don't think he's getting a lot of different, people to talk to. We'll go to him as much as we possibly can.
And I think y'all are doing a great job, by the way. I didn't want to take this thing, I'm just trying to, a lot of comments have come to me in the past few days about that. But I think we're going in the right direction. I really like the stance that you're taking that we're starting school or not keep backing it up a day. I think these kids need to be in school one way or another.
It's funny because in these last guidelines, this last week, they say that time and time again, we forget sometimes that, there are kids who have food insecurities. There are kids who, they have a tough time at home for whatever reason. And those kids need school. They need the stability that school brings. And, it's every argument in the world. The head of the CDC said it the other day, we need the kids to be in school. And I totally agree with it.
Kevin, it looks like there's gonna be a lot of testing on temperatures. When you take the temperatures and so you take it on a daily basis, then do you report everybody you send home? Or do they have to have a test for the COVID and then it gets reported to whomever makes the decisions?
Yes, ma'am. It pretty much, if we're taking tests, if we're sitting there with the I forget what the name of it, touch the thermometer, basically a scan thermometer, and it reads 100.4 or over, then the procedure will be, test the kid again. Let's, give him a second, let's test him again. Test him again, and he's still above that, then we would isolate, we would send him home. We'd let the parents know that was the case, and we, request the parents to get him. At that point, we have to consider that he might have COVID. We don't know if he does or not yet, but we would tell the parents to go to the doctor, get him checked out, and we would go from there. So,
I had a couple of questions.
sure.
Can the parents expect to be contacted with contact tracing? Should they expect that?
I would think so. Now, that's more of a DPH thing than an us thing. But, from what, in the last few cases that we've dealt with, we've actually had, they requested names, they requested phone numbers. So, sounds like they were going to start that process. Now, between us and, well, I guess you two here, when everybody gets back in school and everybody starts having cases, how tenable is that going to be? I don't know. That to me is going to be a great challenge. But that would be my expectation that should take place.
I spoke with a parent today whose child tested positive, and they had phone calls in 24 hours from Atlanta with contact tracing.
Second part, let's say we have a student on an athletic team or in a classroom that tests positive. What's going to be is there a notification process for the class or the team letting them know, hey, you weren't direct contact, but?
Yeah, we have basically a letter, we have that for athletics right now because they developed it for the summer workouts. We'll have that for class as well. And we can't violate privacy laws, obviously, but we can say that, someone in your classroom or someone on your team or someone in your club or whatever has tested positive for COVID. We encourage you to try to monitor symptoms, check yourself for 14 days, blah, blah, blah. And now if that person is deemed close contact, then I would assume they get another phone call from the Department of Health.
And with the concern with the flu season, gonna merge with this, are we offering, or will the students be able to get flu shots on campus this year again?
I've not discussed that with Ms. Hager, but that's something that we typically do through the health department. I'm not sure in light of COVID where we are with that, but we will certainly offer that if it's possible.
Thank you.
Last question, I forgot about this. I had two they said, both of them made a comment we were talking about was, and I said, I don't really know what the policy is yet. They were worried about the little kids with the teachers wearing a mask. Worried about them scared of the teachers not being able to communicate. And I had never even, that thought never even entered my mind about a little kid being scared of a lady wearing a mask. Is there going, if we find that as a trend or something happening, could we have some flexibility with the teachers? I mean, if their kids are scared of them, they're obviously not going to learn or be there.
Well, one thing we've done is we have actually bought face shields for every staff member that we have, so. And because we also know with the little ones, if a teacher is teaching speech, or they're teaching spelling, or they're teaching how to pronounce a word, you know, if you have a mask, kids can't see your lips move, they can't see what happens, so if we feel like a face shield would help that teacher be seen. I think Gary's he actually has one that he bought. Now, it's not quite the one that we have for everybody. The ones we have look a little bit more like a welder mask, I think. Dr. Miller had one on, I think, in his town hall. He put one on for a second.
Good.
But, so we're buying that for every staff member, every teacher, paraprofessional, clerical, custodian, school food service. I mean, everybody is going to get a face shield. Now, they don't have to wear that face shield. They can wear a mask if they rather. They can wear both if they want. But that at least is there for them. Okay.
Ms. Moore?
I feel like what we're experiencing, parents are operating out of fear. And I think that is being increased almost daily because the CDC is so indefinite on, yesterday and today and even the press conferences. And so the more information parents get, the more fear builds up in them, related to their students personally, related to their family, related to possibly individuals living with them or next to them, grandparents or something. And so I'm not positive it is always directed towards the child, but who the child could come in contact with from my conversations. In saying that, I understand what you're saying about wanting to handle it on a case-by-case basis. But is there something that we can give parents, or maybe have already given parents, that is like stepwise, that we're doing, we can you can count on us to follow these procedures if a child, A, on the bus, B, on the classroom, B, at the table at lunch, is identified as someone that has contracted the virus.
Yeah, matter of fact, I'm pretty sure we have that. I don't know if it's on here, if it's a framework, too much of a framework to not be on there. Let's see. It might be in on the link that had that procedure on it, the health procedures. It might actually be on that link.
It's posted on our.
Yeah, the Lake County School System health procedures.
Right.
I think it's I don't know if it's exactly on there, or if it's.
You're talking about the health procedures, and then there's a link to.
Yeah, there's a link that actually goes to that page, so. We do have a kind of a step-by-step here as far as what they're going to do if a child presents as ill at school, and if they suspect COVID. Now, as far as after that point, contacting the parents, I think we have it all the way up to where we contact the parents to come get them, I think. Nurses down PPE, nurses assess student employee determine appropriate next steps, yeah. And I think those next steps would be, again, determined on, do we suspect it could be COVID? If it is, and we would call the parents, we'd have the parents come pick up. We tell the parents kind of what we suspect or what we feel like is going on, and then we would encourage them to go. But we can write that down and add that to this. That wouldn't be a problem. But that part would be consistent. This is what we're doing if a child presents as ill in school. So.
And I know that parents don't look at all the documents, whether it's on the web page, read them in the paper, whatever. Is there a way that we could send that out in a blast to?
Yeah, we can in touch with that.
Just to make sure that we kind of, tried every possible way to make contact with these parents so that they'll know what to expect from the school system.
Yeah, that's easy. We can email that out, it won't be a problem.
Thank you.
I think what she was referencing, somebody had shared with me, Oconee, I believe it was Oconee County, had put out a decision guide that was basically a flow chart that the parents would follow as to yes and no's, something like that.
That's actually kind of circulated on social media. I don't know if that was theirs or not, but there's a flow chart. Yeah, but that was more for what the school was doing or what the organization was doing. And I don't know, Ms. Ford might be thinking more about, what the parent wants to know, how we're gonna do it, and when we contact the parent. But we'll put that together, that won't be hard, and we can send it out, so.
Thank you.
Kevin,
Yes,
you have on the back of the second sheet, the asymptomatic persons with confirmed COVID. How are you going to find out they're asymptomatic if they're not required to have a test before they come to school?
well, a lot of times, there might be somebody that is asymptomatic, but they were around someone else that had it, and they just go and get a test. So that's not real, it's not gonna be something we're looking for, obviously. If if we're all sitting here and none of us are symptomatic, and one of us decides to go get a test and finds out that they're positive, well, that's one thing. But yeah, you're right, nobody is going to just, or most asymptomatic people are not just gonna go, I'm gonna get tested and see what it shows.
Yeah.
See, I wanna miss 10 days work, but in that case, there might be cases where someone gets a test because they feel like they were exposed by someone else. Or it might be somebody who has the sniffles and they decide, I'm gonna get a test, and they end up positive, and the only symptoms they have is basically allergy symptoms. It's not quite asymptomatic, but it's pretty close. Really, really minor.
So what are we gonna do in the case of an asymptomatic positive person and their contact with students?
Same thing. Asymptomatic becomes the same as asymptomatic. If they're positive, then they're positive, and they would be under quarantine.
Even though there's confusing information out there that says asymptomatic people cannot transmit the disease.
Right now, that's the guidance we have, and I think that's what we have to go with. I don't think we can go against the guidance that we have from public health and CDC right now.
And we've dealt with
This is
this issue already.
Asymptomatic with a positive test is what we're discussing, right?
We've dealt with a situation like this already, and other positive tests flowed out of those circumstances, and I'm not saying they were, I don't know how they guided if it was from those that were asymptomatic. That's what I understand is one of the challenges with our young people is that they feel fine, they feel well, and they continue with their activities, and then they're potentially is spread, whether, there's so much in the air, as y'all have well pointed out tonight, even the interpretation of the guidelines, there's some different takes on it.
I've heard the term build the plane as you fly it, and that's kind of what's going on here. What's really interesting is that you're seeing science. Science is all about experiment. This didn't work. Now we do that. This didn't. This is a brand new virus. You look at, none of us were alive in 1918, but you look at the Spanish flu in 1918 and how serious it was. And we've had 100 years now to try to do something to help ourselves against the flu, and we've had basically 6 months now to work something against COVID. So I think that you're going to see changes. I think you're going to continue to see new research come out, and things are going to be accepted. It may very well be that in a month or two, asymptomatic carriers are determined, not contagious. I don't know. It's just not there yet. We have to go kind of with where it tells us to go now. So.
I don't mean to be argumentative, I really don't, but, from a medical standpoint, this is not a new virus. That's what this misinformation drives me crazy. We've been treating coronavirus in the United States as long as I've been alive. Maybe not in people, but, 30% of common cold is by coronavirus. Maybe not this strain. Some of these tests right now that are coming up positive, these young kids, are picking up a coronavirus cold. They're not all just SARS too. There's just so much misinformation out there from the media. I think it has driven fear to the point that nobody wants to leave their house or do anything. it's mind blowing almost to me.
Well, and I totally get your point, because I've seen that as well.
But the point I want to make is that most of what we've learned about medicine has been in the last 20 or 30 years. And everything they taught us about viruses and how they're transmitted, all of a sudden has just gone out the window for this one. I mean, asymptomatic people generally don't pass viruses, unless they're pre-symptomatic and they're contagious, usually running a fever. So now that doesn't, if you touch something, you wipe, you're going to get it. Now this thing lives in the air for days. It's just, some of the things just don't make sense.
They don't. And I agree with you that some people that get it are asymptomatic or just have the symptoms, but the problem is, we're dealing with some of that, but we're also dealing with people who have had relatives die.
Oh, I totally agree.
So we got to navigate that huge swath. There's a student that goes to this school who lost her dad, her sibling, and her aunt, all back in April from this thing. And now, may have been underlying conditions, everything else, I totally get that. But the problem is we've got to navigate that. We've got to navigate the minors and the majors. So.
It's a real virus and it's serious. I'm not discounting that at all. I just, from that rapid morbidity rate, we have developed a huge fear. I've never, or even mortality rate, whatever it was at the time. I mean, it was real. It was fast. But I don't know what the right answer is, and I don't want to discount anything anybody's doing. If we don't do enough, then we could have death if we do too much. It's definitely uncharted water.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
But it is a weird. It is something like I've never seen.
For a return to school, because I heard the discussion in the last several days that they're not necessarily encouraging to go back and retest just because the particles that are shed may be in your system X number of days, weeks, months.
Right.
What kind of documentation are we gonna require to come back in? Does it necessarily have to be a doctor's note? Can it be the parent saying, I test that we've been symptom-free, fever-free?
That's been, my understanding has been, if we know somebody's positive, then they are on a 10-day isolation time. And after those 10 days, if they've been fever-free for 24 hours and 10 days has passed, then they're back in school on day 11. So, and I don't think, we certainly don't, a couple months ago, you needed a test. Matter of fact, some businesses required 2 false tests, and that did not work. That was because there were too many, particles inside that caused a false positive. So they went, again, there's science for you. They tried that didn't work, so now they're going with this. But no, our thing is, and it's the same as DPH, 10 days and then fever-free for 24 hours, which again is better than the 72 hours it was 2 weeks ago. And then back in school after that. And the good part is, at least child, when they go home, can still virtual, they can still do virtual learning, which is not the same as being in person, but at least it's something that we've developed plans for that as well, so.
The community spread was mentioned earlier. And we're at a certain level.
168, I believe, out of 100,000.
We know that cases will go up when we put 7,500 to 8,000 people under the same roof. At what level does the public health department make us, or attempt to make us, do something different?
I'm not sure, to be honest, I can't answer that. I don't have that answer. I do know that counties around us, we're the lowest in our little region here at 168, basically parts per 100,000. The rate of infection is 168 per 100,000, which I think Dr. Miller said that some other counties are 200, maybe even as high as 300 or more. Now, I would have to assume that it would have to rise. I don't know if it would necessarily be the overall infection rate as much as it would be how fast is it accelerating, because right now, when you look at, we have 483 cases, I think was today's data, which means we had 3 in the last 24 hours. Means 24 hours before that, we had, I think, 7, and then 7. So, but in the last couple of weeks, we've had some growth in the number of cases. But looking at the total number, a lot of those cases happened back in March and April. We haven't had nearly as many cases in that time, but I think what they're going to have to look at, I'm not them, but But I think what they're gonna have to look at is how fast is this accelerating in your community? And does that cause us to have to say, well, we've got to pump the brakes?
I guess my point is, are we that close? Will we, at what point would we say that, okay, we start school on the 14th, if we reach this by Labor Day, are we shutting down schools again? Do we have any idea as to how far we have to go before the state or someone else is going to attempt to mandate that we go to all virtual?
I don't know. I don't know that number, and I think that, I think it's gonna be a kind of a, let's see as it goes along. I don't think there is any one number out there, at least I don't know it anyway, so.
I read on the CDC site that, right now they're saying it's 200, that they're gonna leave it up to local things. Nobody's put the value yet of what they would consider a cluster or rise, but they very well may at some point. And I don't know, nobody's published what number that is, or should that I read.
I've seen some discussion of a 5% transmission, but I haven't been able to back it. I don't know if it's a state by state or system by system.
Yeah, I heard that as well.
And also, I think the healthcare system is gonna be a factor. If we see a situation like we did back in March where the ICU was overtaxed and there was a lack of resources or space to meet all the needs, I think that would be a factor in making that determination. But I don't know that we'll see a specific number. I would not expect one. I do think they will give guidance to us about, you need to consider this based on these circumstances. I can speak to the flu. We had a situation about 3 years ago where we had a flu outbreak in our community, and we became very close to, we worked with our public health, and we kind of set a target that we thought would be the point, okay, we need to close school for a few days to mitigate the spread. And we got right up to that point, and then we had a pretty good decline in the number of cases. So I do know that they will work with us on that and help guide us through those decisions. They're not, I don't think they're gonna say, you need to close school at this number, but they may say, you may want to consider, when we approach this level, this is what we need to do. I think for us, when we open school, is we don't want to be a springboard into spreading the virus in the community. Granted, we'll bring a lot of people together, but I think we can control to some degree what goes on in the school. That we hopefully will not make where schools instigate an increase or a spread to the level that we would have to close. But we certainly will work with public health to make that decision, and we'll be ready if that's required.
Would there be an instance where you might have to close one school but not another, or you'll apply?
It could be. In the case with the flu, one particular school and some certain grade levels were being hit really hard. But what we ran into in that situation were some other circumstances that it hard to determine the exact numbers. And we got right up, we consulting with the Department of Public Health, we got right up to a level that we thought we were gonna say, okay, this is it, we gotta close school. And when we got there, we had a weekend, and then coming out of that weekend, we saw a turn in the direction and really got through that time. But I do appreciate Dr. Woods and the public health folks. They've been great. I've been on the phone with him many times through this, and he sometimes calls me at 10 o'clock at night, and I think that's because he's so busy, but he does follow up, and he works with us, and the local Lee County Health Department has been great partners for us as well.
Any other questions of Mr. Bellin?
Thank you.
Thanks, Doc.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, next item on the agenda is Ms. Mamrie. Tell us about virtual learning.
I sure will. Well, first of all, I want to let you know that we started meeting back in May with a remote learning plan for this is with teachers, administrators, parents from all the different schools, all the different grade levels. And so when we first started meeting, basically what we were looking at is if we do have to shut down the school like we did in March and what that plan would look like. And then as we began planning, we sort of got that plan together so that it would be focused on what we would be focusing on for the fall. Because it is a little different in the fall when children are in a new grade, you're teaching new content, new foundational skills, that type of thing. So we're trying to get a good plan of how we would make sure that the teachers were available to teach students. And then that also developed into a virtual option where we were going to give this option to all students, whether or not it has to do with COVID or whether they just want the virtual option. And so what I'm going to talk to you tonight is about specifically the virtual option. As you know, we are opening up face-to-face, and in addition to that, we will also have the virtual option. So with that, the parents were given an application, and in that, we spelled out several things to them to make sure that they were aware of different things. And so with that in mind, just know that the guidance from that came from the Georgia Department of Ed. We've also looked at, for pre-K, the Georgia Department of Early Care and Learning. And then we've also looked at documents from the American Pediatric Association to look at things like screen time and those types of things for our students. And then we've also looked at schedules from other systems. One of the things that I would like to know is can you hear me better?
Yes. thank you.
Okay. One of the things that I would like to know is that a lot of school systems already have, and I would say this is probably above the gnat line, making it above, especially in the Atlanta area, already have a virtual option that they offer for 6 through 12. Not many have that for K through 5, as you can imagine. That is not as easy of a group to do a virtual option with. But of course, with everything that's going on, we are all trying to do whatever we can to make our students and our parents feel more safe and offer whatever kind of option we can do to help them. So when we say the instruction for virtual option this fall will be different from this past spring, what we really mean by that is that in the spring, a large majority, if not all of the standards had already been taught. And this was primarily in preparation for the state mandated testing at the different levels. In addition, we did not have as many live sessions. And so, as you know, I'm sure you have Zoomed quite a good bit. I know you have for the board meetings, so we've learned a lot about Zoom. We've also learned a lot about Google Meets and that type of thing. So we are much more proficient with that than we were, I would say, in the spring. So in the spring, a lot of the Zoom meetings or the check-ins that teachers did were primarily for that, to check in on students, to check in on their mental, emotional states, make sure they were doing okay, and that type of thing. Not as much for teaching content at that time. We did much more of that through packets and that type of thing at the lower levels. But this is not going to be the case in the fall. As students are entering the new grade, we have got to teach some new content, and we need to make sure that we are doing that in a way that helps the students and doesn't put the burden of that on the parent, because they are not the teachers. We do not expect them to be the teachers, but we want our teachers to be able to provide their expertise where that is concerned. And we want to make sure that we do that in a way that is conducive to whatever the teachers need to do with the children, but also the parents can help manage what is going on with that. As with any plan, it's critical that our teachers be given the flexibility to determine what will and what won't work where this is concerned. Our teachers always rise to the occasion, and will do so with this as well. And so that's one of the things that I can tell you. Our teachers have been studying plans, working on this throughout the summer, not just those on my committee, but also those that are in the school, because at some point, you never know, we may have to, as you were talking about earlier, if we have to all go virtual. We want everybody to be aware of the types of things that we need to do. So we have done professional learning with that as well, even throughout the summer. Parents and students choosing the virtual option do need to have internet access. They need to be able to have live sessions, be able to do a Zoom, be able to do a Google Meet. We're really going to be using Google Meet. We're a G Suite system. We have been doing that for years now throughout all of our schools. So even at the lower levels, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but our primary children have Gmail accounts that we pay for within the system, so they all will be able to have access to a Google Classroom. That is nothing new for us, and so we have been doing that for quite some time. In addition to that, we also, in the application that went out, parents do need to have an electronic device for the students. We do have limited devices that schools can provide, but we will not have enough for every student choosing the virtual option. We noted this in the application. This should not be a huge issue since we were able to accommodate children in the spring. But we have noticed that we have an increased number of those asking for devices. But in some cases, we're finding that it's because the household may only have one computer and they're wanting to have an additional computer. So basically what we're going to have to do is try to accommodate that, but we will have to prioritize based on necessity and extreme necessity where that's concerned. And so we will have to have computers as well for face-to-face instruction in the schools. So we can't lend out all the Chromebooks to everybody at home. So we're going to have to make a judgment call with that. And we have talked with principals, and they're working on plans to figure out how to do that the best way. Virtual pre-K through 12th grade students will have school Monday through Friday. Now, of course, this is going to look different from grade level to grade level. Teachers will follow the same system curriculum maps and pacing guides for virtual instruction as they do for the face-to-face instruction. We have to make sure that we keep these students on track because at some point they're going to come back. And we hope they'll come back sometime during the year, for that matter. So we want them to be in the same places as our students that are in face-to-face. The method of the instruction will be a blend of both synchronous and asynchronous learning, which means whole group. There will be some whole group moments, and there will be some on your own kind of moments. And of course, that is going to look different depending on if you're talking about a kindergartner versus a 12th grade student. Some of this will be through live sessions. Some of those sessions will be recorded, some will not. We're going to let the teachers use the discretion with that, but we have asked for a certain amount of time during the week. For example, at pre-K level, I'll just tell you what DECAL has put out some very specific guidelines of how often those children will have small group with their teacher. They will also have individual sessions. So for example, a pre-K teacher who is offering or who will be doing the virtual teaching is going to have, I believe it's, I'll probably say it wrong now that I'm telling you this, but it's on their plan that is posted on their website. But they're going to have somewhere approximately 2 to 3 live sessions with a student individually during the week. In addition to that, they're going to have some small groups. So it may be 2 or 3 students, depending on where the students are and how they're going to group and differentiate based on assessments that they do with them. In addition to that, there's going to be 5 to 10 minutes of reading daily. So what we've tried to do is take some of those pre-K plans and then look at what we're doing at 6 through 12, which is a little bit different, and try to make it work for all the different levels. Services such as gifted, special ed accommodations, speech, If they have EIP, 504s, MTSS, all of that will be provided. Currently, administrators are working on those types of schedules with the virtual teachers and with our different departments to make sure that we can provide all of those services with those students. And it may be at different times. So that's one of the things that when the teachers come in for the 2 weeks of planning, we're going to be working a lot still on scheduling and making all of that fit in the best schedule possible. Pre-K through 5th grade students will have a virtual teacher that is teaching just virtual. So we have 2 teachers per grade per school, and that is from pre-K through 5th grade. So it's a total of 26 teachers right now that will be doing just virtual teaching with those students, or with the students who are virtual at home. At 6 through 12, that is going to look different. Trying to figure out schedules for students, for example, I'll use 9th grade campus. At the 9th grade campus, we had 12 students that are supposed to be in an honors biology class. 12 students who have elected to be virtual. Well, we can't make a section for just 12 students at the 9th grade campus for the virtual biology, honors biology. In order to do that, you would have to take students, you'd make a virtual section, you put those 12 in it, but the same teacher is going to be teaching all of those honors biology kids. So you would have to take a section away from the regular face-to-face and feed all of those kids into the other classes, which would then up the numbers in those classes, which would kind of defeat the purpose of social distancing. So it's not going to be just a virtual teacher per se. Now, in some cases, we may be able, and they have already scheduled some virtual sections for teachers, but for the most part, 6 through 12 will be doing both. Face-to-face instruction and virtual instruction, and at times it will be at the same time. Let that sink in for a moment, because that is going to be very different from what we have been doing. So in order for us to be able to do that at those levels, those teachers are going to really have to look at their lesson planning. They're really going to have to think through how to provide that lesson to the students so that it can be the most effective. So it may start out where they're doing a whole group instructional moment, and that is a live session where if I'm a virtual student at home, I'm going to need to basically do through a Google Meet the live session, and while that whole group instruction is going on, I'm going to be sitting there just like the face-to-face students would be. And then after that, it may be that the teacher is going to do some moments where the kids have some different types of assignments in the class that they're going to be working on, and while the video may not be going or the live session, the teacher might be able to check or will be able to check the chat boxes. So if the students have questions, you know, I'll use math, for example. You don't want to teach a new concept in math, or a new concept in anything for that matter, to students who are at home virtually. Just post some kind of a resource and tell them, you know, I'll check in with you in the next couple of days and see if you figured it out. So we're trying to provide ways where that classroom teacher is going to be able to provide them with the instruction that they need and give them an opportunity for questions and to be able to actually talk to them. So that's the hope of what we're doing. It is new. We haven't done this before. Even the virtual classes we've had at the high school, a lot of those have been through Georgia Virtual School. You also have to keep in mind that some of the dual enrollment those classes have also been online, but of course that's taken care of through the colleges. And we've had some teachers to do some online courses. And they have done a great job at the high school level, but we have not done that at the lower levels. Really not below 10th grade. I may be saying that incorrectly, but I don't think we've even done that in 9th grade from our own teachers there. So, and I know that was one of the questions that came up, I believe, at one of the last board meetings, so I wanted to make sure I covered that. The other thing I would say is our teachers, whether they're teaching virtually or face-to-face, are going to be in the schools. They are going to have normal working hours, so they will have access to their computers, to their boards, to whatever equipment, technology that they may need. And I know that was a question that came up about flexibility of time with students who are going to be virtual. To that, I would say this. Our teachers are going to do the best job that they can possibly do to provide these students with the education that they need, and I truly believe that. But I also think we have to keep in mind that the teachers are going to be working just like they would normally be working. And so they're not going to be able to be available at 10 o'clock at night when a parent gets home from work to work with a child. Some things can be recorded. Some things will not be able to be recorded. It just is going to depend on what it is they are doing at the time. Plus, I will just say this, if you're thinking, I'll just say a 7th grade student. If you've got 6 subjects, or a high school student, I would just say, knowing my own children, who I love dearly if they're watching, they're not going to probably watch 6 and 7 hours worth of footage. So we've got to figure out a way, and that's why we talk about screen time versus the time that we're going to be doing the actual assignments. But when they are doing the live sessions, or if they're recording, we want to make sure that that is a recording that those children need to watch and will hopefully watch, and that they will make sure that they are providing the most efficient instruction at that time. So it's going to be a different way. We've got to redo some lessons. We've got to redo some of those types of things, and that's really what the planning time at the beginning is going to be focused on. They have already been working. We have sent out multiple webinars and different pieces of professional learning that's out there, some provided by Georgia Department of Ed, some that we have found, everything from instructing parents on Google Classroom and instructing them on different parts of it as well. So, you name it, we're doing it. Other questions?
Anyone?
Susan, did the virtual teachers volunteer? Did most of those who are doing virtual volunteer for that, or did you have to assign?
So the principals at the lower levels, pre-K through 5, or at the pre-K, primary, and elementary, they did ask for volunteers. We actually had quite a large number that volunteered. And all the ones that volunteered, we didn't have, as of yet, we do not have enough students for them. I should also tell you that we have 16 teachers, and a lot of those are at our lower level, either primary or elementary, that are also going to be involved in an online teaching endorsement that's being offered through Middle Georgia RESA. And so we are actually paying for them to do that as well. In 6 through 12, pretty much they worked with their leadership teams, which involve their teachers, and basically work through the scenarios. This is what we're going to be doing. A lot of 6 through 12 also comes down to the scheduling aspect. Typically, when you offer a virtual option at higher levels, you don't necessarily offer every elective. As you can imagine, some electives are easier to do virtually than others. So it has been quite trying with trying to figure that out, and I commend the administration and the teachers for trying to figure it out and to work with the kids and try to give them every opportunity that they can. It's an unusual year, so we're trying to be as flexible as we possibly can. They are working very hard to try to figure it out and make it what it needs to be. So, hands down, I commend them.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Students kindergarten through 3rd grade have 270 minutes of instruction required by the state, about 4.5 hours. How would a teacher divide up that day? I mean, will the teacher do the instruction for 4.5 hours, or it will be a portion of that will be direct instruction?
So of course, well, first of all, with the 270 minutes, we've actually, as a strategic waiver system, we've waived all of that. Now we still try to offer that, obviously, and actually we do a little bit more most of the time. But how that's going to work, it's not that we're going to reduce that down. There will be some direct instruction, but then there will be some time that the students have to work in that particular content area, whether it be ELA, math, science, social studies, plus their specials. So all of that will be offered. Now, with that said, the live instruction that the virtual teachers will do, let's say for a reading block, they will probably most likely do some time with reading, then they'll do some time with writing, then they'll do some time with phonics or grammar, that type of thing. And then the kids will have at different times small group, because we will still be formatively assessing. They will have certain days set aside. I think primary, one day, I believe it was Wednesdays, they were going to set aside for some individual formative assessing with students that they'll do live as well. And then they'll use that to figure out their small groups, and then they'll meet with small groups for a period of time. But during all of that, there will be some assignments and things that are given to the students as well. So it will still probably equal to that amount of time.
So these kindergarten through third grade students are going to be working independently?
Well, that is where the parents come in. That is where the parents come in, because they're gonna have to work with them. And where it may only be that the live session may only be 15 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 minutes, there will be some other work that the child will have to do. And so I will tell you that is one of our greatest concerns about the virtual option at the lower levels, because it's going to be difficult. I will just say. But I'm assuming now, with that said, I'm assuming that parents who have chosen that for their younger children understand that that is what they will be doing with them. And let me make sure you understand too, that that doesn't mean that they're going to sit, that child will not sit in front of a computer for 4.5 to 5 hours. There will be breaks, there will be times, like I said, where there's a live session and then they'll work. So, but it is still going to be an undertaking. I would think I will just say if it were me and I'm working, I know that that's going to be difficult. And that was I think that's why we keep saying too, it's going to be so different from spring, because we were all at home. You know, we were all at home with our children. We were teaching virtually. We were working with our kids virtually. We were there to fuss at them if they weren't doing it, or to sit down if they're a very small child with them on a computer and work with the teacher to try to help teach them. It's going to be very different in the fall, because a lot of our parents are essential workers. And again, I'm assuming that if our parents have chosen that, then they have that set up with however that's going to look, whether it's them or a grandparent or something of that nature. And our teachers are planning at the very beginning of this to do, obviously reach out to all of the students that are going to be on their caseload, or in their classrooms, I should say, and to make sure that those expectations are discussed, and try to work with them on those times. You know, if it's throughout the school day, if there's a moment where they have to do individual and that type of thing, they're going to work with them as best they can to be flexible. So if this time works better for this particular parent versus this one, it's going to take some doing, but they're going to do the best that they can to try to accommodate as many as they possibly can.
I know that parents, one of the things we discussed earlier was that the parents would like the instructional time, the direct instructional time recorded, so if they needed to come back in the evening and listen and help their child, you know, they would be able to do that. What kind of ratio are we going to do from students to teachers, the ones that are teaching virtually?
It's pretty close right now to the face-to-face. Initially, we thought we were going to have much higher numbers in the virtual classes, but I would say it's pretty comparable to what we were doing face-to-face. There may be a few more, and when I say a few more, if there's normally, let's say 20 in a kindergarten class, and that's probably higher than what we normally have. But if there's 20, then there might be 23 virtually right now. However, where that's going to get a little interesting is that, and if we have to shift a teacher from face-to-face to virtual, depending on enrollment numbers, because we're still offering the virtual and the face-to-face to our new enrollees. So while the application was closed to our currently enrolled, you know, if you're new to Lee County, we're still allowing you to choose that option, because we just thought, that's only fair, you know. So with that said, there's always the possibility we may have to shift to accommodate numbers depending on those types of things. Plus, at pre-K through pre-K through 8th grade, it is a 9-week commitment. So if those parents at the end of the 9 weeks decide that they want their students to come back face-to-face, then we will honor that. And that may take, that's going to be another scheduling moment where we're going to have to shift around. So it may be that some of the teachers who are teaching virtually, it might be that we have enough students that are coming back in that we need to then shift those students and the teachers differently. So, and that was one of the things we did put in the application, because, you know, if you're changing teachers after 9 weeks, that can sometimes be very difficult for the smaller babies. And so we wanted them to kind of, you know, think through that as well. But they're trying to work with them as best they can. I know that the principals have already talked to several parents who wanted one thing, you know, wanted them to go virtual, and then after they kind of thought it through, they've reached out to the principals, and they're trying to work with what they can. So it's new territory, that's for sure. But I think we're going to do the very best, and I think that our kids are in good hands. So.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
I don't know how to ask it really. Being in school sometimes is, you know, it's more about just learning. Children that don't have a good home, teachers are there to see that. I mean, I don't know that it occurs in the county, and just say that abuse, you know, teachers pick up on
Very much so.
behavior as well as appearances. Are we going to have any way to check on these kids that are on the virtual for 9 weeks? I mean, at all? I mean, a way to do some sort of health check or wellness check? I mean, just make sure, whatever you guys do, you're good at doing it.
I'm not sure I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just saying, our teachers are mandated reporters, and they understand that. That's part of Ms. Manry's expectations for our virtual learning educators, and they still have that role. So if they have cause for concern, they will follow up on that. And you know, that continued on when we had the COVID closure in March, and our school social worker has worked with the schools to, you know, and which is what she does all year if there's a concern or a need to address that.
I mean, yeah, y'all did great contacting, like my kids would contact, I think, more when they were out of school than they were. But I just mean, like, this new territory, doing it all digitally, you know, that's what I assume.
And we do have a concern that we may have some students, if you read a lot of the articles, that there are kids who become almost missing in action because they were not on the live sessions, that type of thing. So yes, those types of things, we will definitely be doing some checks of that nature. We've had a few, actually. Back in the spring, I know of one situation I was even involved in, because it was one of those where the parents were essential workers, or it was a single parent situation. The child had to live with someone else out of the state, but we tracked it down, figured out what was going on. And then we had some other situations too that came up with all of that too. But I will say that is one of the things that they were very good. Our counselors were involved, our Miss Bailey, our system social worker, and they, for every situation, they were able to track down and find out what was going on with the child and make sure they were okay. So we'll continue to do that.
Once things settle down, once everything kind of gets off the ground, would you let us know? I would like to just, you know, observe in those classrooms and just see how things going at the different levels.
Yes.
You know, primary, elementary.
Yes. Yes, most definitely.
Any other questions?
Any feel for whether the end of year PSATs, milestones?
We haven't gotten the, we know that it's in the hands of the feds, the U.S. Department of Ed, I should say. And, we're waiting for word at this point. The last I heard, I don't even know if I should say that, but the last I heard is, it's looking favorable, but we have not heard any final. And my understanding is Georgia is the first, state that did request, so I'm hoping that is the case, but
Would you, what you said about when away from testing and gain those days back? I just-
so one of the things to just keep in mind as all of this goes, and I know we have lots of decisions to make, you know, typically when we get into about mid-April, from mid-April, we start state mandated testing. Usually around April 14th, April 15th to April 20th, somewhere in there is when we start testing at elementary and middle school level for milestones. And then pretty much from the end of, actually it's mid-April as well at the high school because we have end of pathway, in addition to end of course test and AP testing. So pretty much from mid-April on is testing. So what we try to do is, and our teachers have pacing guides that they follow to try to cover all those standards prior to that. So just keep in mind that even though, you know, if we have, with pushing back, for example, this week, from the 7th to the 14th, you know, you still have that time at the end of the school year that typically we're testing, and we're most likely not going to be doing that. So that may give you some, just as you're thinking through calendars and that type of thing. But we're going to be in school on August 14th.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Bennett.
You're welcome.
Moving on to the next, do we need to take a break? We've been at this for 2 hours. Y'all want to take a 5-minute recess and then come back to do the rest of this? Is that all right, Blair?
Please.
Okay. We'll take a 5-minute recess. Come back. Y'all good on that side? All right. I will call the meeting back to order. The next item on our agenda is the calendar update. Who's got that?
The board has a memo regarding the calendar. When we decided to move the days to start back 1 week, we obviously need to make an adjustment to the calendar. So Mr. Dowling has prepared a memo and a sample calendar for the board to consider.
What is the pleasure of the board as it relates to this calendar adjustment?
Move that we accept the 2021 calendar adjustment.
That was a motion by Ms. Lang. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Ford. Is there any questions? Any discussion?
Well, I have the same question I had before. You did consider waiting till after Labor Day, but you just passed on by.
Yes, ma'am, that option is still on the table if the circumstances warrant with the community spread. But right now, thankfully, we're in good shape with that regard, and we want to move forward with the 14th.
We're aware of the changes, but do you want to share what days were shifted on the calendar?
Can the people online see this? They can see the calendar online. Okay.
You gotta go to the other one, Mr. Dowling.
No. No, it's fine. You're good. All right, I mean, this is fine too.
I could just talk about it and then we'll hear it.
Oh.
So we had 2 inclement weather days, if you will remember. We kind of built those into the calendar thinking, hurricanes, tropical storms, which still could happen. So we took those away and we made those back into school days. And since we're missing 5 days, we wanted to recoup 3 days if we could. And so we also made February 12th, which is a teacher work day. We made that into what we call a digital learning day, which would be just basically students would have assignments on that day. They would not come to school, but they would get assignments and they could complete the work digitally or at home. So. I think other than that, we didn't do much more.
All right. Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of the revised 2020-2021 school calendar, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Passes. Item number 5 is approval of the final budget for FY21. We've had the legislatively required budget hearings. And nothing has changed as a result of those hearings or any planning by the school system. What is the pleasure of the board as it relates to our budget?
I move we approve the budget.
We have a motion by Ms. Van. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Newell. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
I have some concerns. We have 2 groups of individuals that make up our school system, both the certified and the classified individuals. And I know that the classified group, we have seen, through the course of last year, there's people that leave the system. And I think it was possibly recognized, and they did increase the salary, but I do feel like, and while I'm very thankful to the governor for the $3,000 increase that he gave to our certified personnel, I think we need to be very mindful of the other group of classified individuals and make sure that, that they also receive an increase enough to be able to support their families and not leave our school system for a job that could be a higher paying job.
Anything else? Hearing no further discussion, all those who have voted in favor of approving the budget as presented, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
Nay.
It passes 4-1. Next item on the agenda is the adoption of the SPLOST referendum. Dr. Miller?
Education Special Purpose Local Option Sales Tax, or E-SPLOS, is a 1 cent sales tax used to fund capital projects for Lee County schools. E-SPLOS requires voter approval, of course, and you have before you a copy of the draft of the referendum resolution, legal notices embodied in Exhibit A of the referendum resolution, and a ballot question, which is embodied in the legal notice.
What is the pleasure of the board as it relates to our SPLOST referendum?
I move we approve the referendum as stated.
We have a motion by Ms. Van. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Ms. Glenn. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Ms. Phillips?
We currently, as of this day, the system owes $17 million. By 2013, 8,000, a little bit over 8,000, why am I saying 1,000? Million. 17 million. By 2013, the 8.4 million will be paid off, but there will be a balance left of 9.1 million that will not be paid off until 2034. I have some concerns about this SPLOST because of the two facilities. One will be renovated, one will be constructed at the cost of, it is in the referendum of $26 million. And so if you look at adding the 9 million to the 26 million, that's relatively significant. And then along with the general obligation bond, there are fees, service, and interest. And so all of that added together makes, a lot of indebtedness for the school system. One of my concerns also, while the board has not finalized the options for the SPLOST, certainly the primary school would be the number one consideration. And then there are other events, there are other renovations, there are other upgrades that are listed in the SPLOST, one being a gym for the high school. If we considered the gym to have a priority, adding the primary school and the gym together would pretty much negate us being able to do some other things. And when you look at the list of the projects that we have listed in the past, a lot of the projects don't get done because the things that we're doing there's a lot of expense with those. For example, one of the things would be technology. We are spending money in other areas, and we could use a lot of that money and make sure that the schools were well equipped with technology on a one-to-one correspondence with the students. There's also just paying off the current debt that we have would be an outstanding thing to do. I know over at the Twin Oaks campus, there are gym doors that when it rains, it runs under the doors and the floor is gone in the gym. That portion of the floor is gone. And that has been an ongoing issue for a long time that SPLOST has not addressed and not corrected. And it's back on SPLOST again to go over and do an awning or a portico for Twin Oaks. But in the meantime, there has been a lot of the floor that has been ruined as a result of not putting up anything. So I feel like, that there are different things, well, certainly the baseball field over there and things that the baseball players could use, in their area. But there are things, because we have such big projects, things aside, you know, to be able to pay for the larger projects. And you would really have to do that if we did make the choice to renovate the primary school and then build the gym. So, you know, at this time, that would be, it would be hard for me to consider obligating the school system for that period of time and possibly even a second opportunity for the voters to approve the SPOS. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Any other comment? I will say as a general rule, I think SPOS funding of capital projects is the best way to go. And I will support this referendum because of that stance. However, as I've made known before, I'm not negating the need for a gymnasium. I'm just not convinced that we can afford gymnasium at this point in time with the SPOS. However, there's enough projects that are on this list that are needed, that voting for this SPOS referendum gives us options as a school board to make those choices in the future. I see on page A2 of this proposed referendum, it says, plans, specifications for the capital outlay projects described in the above ballot question have not been initiated and bids have not been received. Depending upon acquisition and construction costs and available funds, the Board of Education may add to, modify, or delete specific projects. So we have the wherewithal to make those decisions as a board once we get past a certain figure for the primary school renovations. That is goal number one. Knowing that, unfortunately, after the end of the year, we won't have Ms. Van here to help us make these decisions, but I know both of the gentlemen that are up for the runoff in her seat, and I'm confident of their abilities to think through that as well and help us come to a decision when it comes time, number one, to initiate the sale of bonds, and number two, to determine whether or not we can actually afford a gym at that time. So, having stated that, I am in favor of the referendum as it is. Are there any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Passes 4-1. All right. Get back to that screen. We have, next item on the agenda will be an executive session, and after that executive session, we will not take up any additional business. Ms. Vane?
I move that we go into executive session to discuss or deliberate upon the appointment, employment, compensation, hiring, disciplinary action, or dismissal, or periodic evaluation or rating of a public officer or employee, or to interview applicants for the position of superintendent.
We have a motion by Ms. Vane. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Lane. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? We are in executive session. Thank you very much.